Holy guacamole. CJ, that was an incredible intro, man.
There we go.
That's excellent.
Did you do that intro? You made that happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a surprise. Wow. Okay.
That was really cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
I liked it.
I enjoyed it very much so.
Same
Folks,
here.
welcome. It's the Rogue News Roundtable. I am V, the Gorilla, and we have, of course, Matthew Ehret. CJ's here working the airwaves, and we have a very special guest, Martin Sieff. Martin, you're the first time here on Rogue News. Welcome. We're the original geopolitical, geostrategic, geoeconomic news channel that was on the internet. I'm not on the internet, but on YouTube. Welcome. It's a pleasure having you on. Please introduce yourself to the audience so that we can familiarize ourselves with you.
Thank you. Well, I'm a very veteran Washington, D.C. newsman. I was with the Washington Times and then United Press International for 23 years, and I've been with other outfits since then as well. I'm originally Irish from Northern Ireland, and I've been almost nowhere in the Southern Hemisphere and virtually everywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. I've covered stories in Russia, the Middle East, China, Japan, India, Southeast Asia. You can name a few other places too. So I have been around a lot. I covered the collapse of communism. I covered the New World Disorder, which is more disordered than anything I grew up with in the 1960s and 1970s. And I've seen a lot.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm glad you said New World Disordered. I was wondering where I got the terminology from, and now I can attribute that to you.
I think you said it before me.
Yeah, I think you framed it perfectly. And I always said this to a lot of our audience. It says, don't worry what the Western oligarchs have planned for you. Worry about what they're breaking in the process, because that's what these guys are.
That is such a central issue. You're absolutely right, because most conspiracy theories imagine that most conspiracies, or all of them, of course, when they're real, and many are real, go like clockwork. And it is not like that. We have a world of 7.5 billion human beings. And the biggest reason we actually need transparency and accountability is not because secret plans work perfectly, but because they go off the rails and they never really work at all. And there is always my dear friend Matt and I lock horns on this and many other issues all the time. I'm an admirer of Karl Popper. I know you are not, bless you, Matt. But Popper rightly points out the law of unexpected, unintended consequences, which actually goes back to the basic of physics. It goes back to the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, which, of course, being an Irishman, we got it first. It's Murphy's law. Right. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And then, of course, there is the less known O'Brien's expansion of Murphy's law. And that is, O'Brien says Murphy was an optimist. So we are in a chaotic world. And the more these self-complied geniuses like the neocons and the Davis crowd and the rest of it come up with their own instant solutions for everything and still worship Keynes mindlessly, the more they try to impose a single solution on everything, the worse it gets.
Yep, exactly correct.
And this is actually in basic physics. It's in the warp and woof of the way the universe works.
Very well said. It's incredible. Martin, I'm so glad that you're here, and what a delight it is. You've covered a lot of things. What is your take on the current crop of events that are happening? Matthew and I, we get together so many times, we talk about and we narrate basically the collapse of the third world. And when I say third world, I'm not talking about, the West. I'm not talking about the third world. I'm talking about us. Because we've been living off the rent check that the dollar has been providing us as world reserve currency for so many decades. And now the chickens have come home to roost. Where do you see these events unraveling, especially what's taking place in Eurasia and in China and the lunatics that are in the West? Go for it, Martin.
I don't have an answer for you because there are so many answers for you and you know them already. Yeah. I'm quite of an age, as anyone who's looking at me can see. And I was very pessimistic in my 20s in the 1970s because the world seemed to be going to hell in a handbasket. Afterwards, at least if you were in the prosperous Anglo-American West and Western European West, from the 1980s onwards, things cheered up. We had Bruce Springsteen. We had culture was more optimistic. Lots of terrible things were happening around the world, but you could, if you were in America or Britain or parts of Western Europe, you could pretend they weren't. And then we had the collapse of communism, and there was a brief moment of optimism. I worked for a genius at that time, the late Arno de Borgraaf, who was for more than 30 years chief foreign correspondent of Newsweek magazine before he ran the Washington Times. And Arno was quite literally ahead of everyone, all of us, in predicting that heaven on earth was not going to come in 1990 or 1991 when communism went down across Eurasia. He said things are going to be worse rather than better. And he sent me to all the places where things were getting worse rather than better. So I didn't have to be prescient. I had my nose rubbed in it by seeing what was happening across Russia, across the Middle East. And we also see across large areas of sub-Saharan Africa as well, increasingly over the decades. But even so, we then made things much worse. Our global war on terror was an unlimited catastrophe. I still regard George W. Bush as by far and away the most catastrophic and stupid and destructive of all American presidents. So much of what's happening negatively, even to this day, is what he locked us into, from NATO expansion provoking Russia to the East, to this insane global war on terror, GWOT, which if you pronounce it, it's G-what. I think I would like to convince you guys at Rogue Radio, bless you, to join me in a crusade to get people to call it what it is. It was G-what, because the dumb jerk didn't even know what he was doing. And even the so-called geniuses like Cheney and Wolfowitz, who pulled his strings, thought they knew what they were doing, and of course didn't really know what they were doing. So they made things far worse, even from their own point of view. They thought they were taking over the oil of Iraq forever, which was insanely megalomaniac and stupid, but they really believed it. I've met most of these guys. I've been in the room with most of them. They wouldn't remember me from being there. I would be a fly on the wall with 20 or 200 other people. But when you're in the room with these people, you pick up their vibes. You pick up their Curlian auras. You see their body language. It's important. I'm an old-fashioned humanist reporter with roots in the Renaissance, which is, if we're human beings, we are the measure of all things as individual human beings. And there is no substitute for going places and seeing things. And something matters of at least one, probably 2 generations younger than me, but philosophically, we found we're exactly on the same ground. We distrust the same abstract. William Jennings Bryan, a somewhat bizarre and antiquated figure in American political history, but in many respects a more attractive man than he's made out to be. He said famously, "One shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." Today we see the human race, 7.5 billion people plus, crucified on what Fyodor Dostoevsky called the tyranny of advanced ideas. You know, the tyranny of advanced ideas. The world is flat. No, it isn't. Free trade increases prosperity. No, it doesn't. It increases chaos, global organized crime, and poverty all across the world. Right. Free trade raises the living standards of most human beings. No, it depresses them. It doesn't close the gap between rich and poor. It carves it wide open. Everything you see in the mainstream media is a lie and is the opposite of reality. And because the so-called intellectuals read this, and George Orwell predicted this in 1984, it is not ordinary working people around the world or in Britain or America or Japan or Russia or anywhere else who fall for this poisonous nonsense. It is the intellectuals. It is the people with 2 or 3 degrees after the name who read the New York Times every day or the London Times or the Guardian and take it all seriously, which is why what you guys do is so important. Because truth is being snuffed out. A guy who I have a guilty pleasure for, because he was a fascist, he wasn't a racist, but he wasn't anti-black or anti-Jewish or anything like that. He was actually admirable in these issues, but he was a power-hungry demagogue in his day. But he was also very entertaining, and he was brilliant, even a genius. And that was the American 1930s politician Huey P. Long, governor and senator from Louisiana. And Huey was asked in the mid-1930s, when he was challenging President Roosevelt for the presidency, would have been a catastrophe for America and the country and the world had he won. But he ended up being killed not by a conspiracy, something I can even go into because I was privileged to get information on this 30 years ago. It's a fascinating story, by the drunken incompetence of his own guards.
Yeah.
Who shot an innocent man by mistake and shot him mortally while they were riddling the innocent doctor with 40 bullets at the time. If you're going to have guards, they have to be loyal to you, but they also have to be sober and they have to be competent. Which President Kennedy's guards, by the way, were certainly not on the streets of Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. I digress as usual. But what Huey P. Long was asked, can fascism come to America? Can it take over the United States of America? And he, of course, was the most likely candidate to be fascist dictator at the times. He was the best expert you could have on this. What was his reply? He said, sure it can.
Very well said.
Only it'll be called anti-fascism.
Right.
And this is what we see in America since 9/11 and the Patriot Act. We see fascism being slowly but systematically imposed on the American people and on the entire West in the name of anti-fascism. The American people are being enslaved in the name of protecting them and freeing them and protecting their freedoms. And the very act supposedly to protect their freedoms are eroding those very freedoms.
Very well said, Matt. Matt Martin. Very well said. Joaquin Flores. Joaquin Flores is here.
Hey.
Joaquin, welcome.
Hey, can you hear me? Am I coming in good?
Yes, superb.
Superb. Yeah, we were just talking about Martin's take on what's going on in Eurasia and all the things. And Joaquin, since you're already out there, what's the latest? What's happening? What are you feeling? What are you sensing out there and seeing for yourself?
Well, here in former Yugoslavia, in Serbia, Belgrade, there's the European Union's sanctions on itself. They've applied to Serbia because of the transit of oil. And so now, Serbia is experiencing some of the very bad consequences of the European sanctions, despite not being in the European Union. So there's some sense, I don't know the legal argument exactly being made at the level of Serbia and supranational, litigation, but there's a sense that there's something unjust, something that can't be legal about that. We remember like what happened with Kaliningrad and, threatening to cut them off and applying the European sanctions to a country, Russia, that's not in the European Union effectively for transit. And this is transit, in this case, of oil, right? Not to a European Union country, but by applying their own sanctions, so it creates this destabilizing scenario here that we are now experiencing, and it's very serious. And more broadly, there's a lot of concerns about the potential for some type of attack with unconventional weapons, let's say, and those concerns look very real.
Unbelievable. Matthew Ehret, what's your take on everything?
Oh, I mean, what the previous two gentlemen said, I very much share. We are in a situation right now where we are doubling down on suicide. It seems like that is the strategy that has been deployed to try to combat a non-existent threat. I mean, Russia has only exhibited goodwill for the past 20 years, as much as China, in its desire to work with us to find common ground to make billions of dollars of profits, opening up the vast reserves of natural resources in the Arctic. And Putin has made accolades again and again to Bush, to Cheney, to Obama. Trump was much more receptive to these things, but that didn't last very long. The Canadian government has received so many offers from their Russian counterparts to simply stop acting belligerently and disrespectfully and start looking out for our own interests, of which there are so many. We share this giant Arctic territory. With China, it's the biggest growth dynamic in the world. And China has offered the West many opportunities to work with the Belt and Road Initiative, building projects in Asia, in Africa, even Chinese representatives at different times have even said since 2015, well, how about we convert some of the US dollar reserves that we're just sitting onto that are worthless? I mean, it's trillions of dollars that are worthless, and just turn them into some development credits to back the growth of some infrastructure in North America. And in every situation up until this point, we have not only turned a blind eye, but we've spat in their face and actually started saber rattling to this agenda that has nothing to do with the welfare of the people. The financier oligarchy, like Marty said, are operating on a very strict script that they doubled down on and got really arrogant, believing this was like the end of history. And I'm talking like 1991, 92. They were like, we're here. We won. It's over. And it's just now a matter of tying up the loose ends to this new world order. And then we can get on with our long-awaited dream of finally doing what we failed to do in 1944, 45. We failed it earlier in 1933. We failed it when the League of Nations was brought online, and the League of Nations covenant was supposed to immediately replace the system of sovereign nation states. We failed it, when we failed to break Lincoln, break the Union, because of the special U.S. Russian, at the time, even some Canadian powerful statesmen had a much higher and more creative idea of how to do battle, in the 1860s, and they broke the agenda to, undo the American Revolution. So this financier oligarchy has been at it for a long time, trying and setting into motion processes that blow up in their faces every single time. It's not like, people should wonder why it was that the City of London, Wall Street backed, fascist machine of Adolf Hitler, why did that fail to be the successful New World Order as it was intended to be? When Roosevelt was saying, some people talk about a new world order, but let me just tell you, it's not new and it's not order. It failed again and again. So now they're thinking, here we are. We finally got it all figured out. And the reality is most of the world's population and their representatives are not going along, are not playing ball. And so, in Canada, we've got laws that have been passed that are saying now that it's legal to confiscate Russian assets in Canada in order to nominally pay for the Ukrainian reconstruction, which I think is really just it's a bit of a lie. Chrystia Freeland, when she passed this bill C-19 in July of this year, she said reconstruction, but I think it was just to pay for more weapons into the hands of exposable Ukrainians. They're now doing the same thing in the US, in the European Union. They're saying, we're finally gonna. We don't intend to freeze Russian assets. We intend to confiscate them. So that's a new thing. But they're also saying, Ursula von der Leyen, I think it was also saying, and Joaquin made a post on this. I thought was a good observation, that we have to only now change the laws to make it legal for us to do what we've been doing, which is like you're kind of admitting that what you've just done has been illegal the whole time. So yeah, it's a lot of insanity. You got to have a good sense of humor in a sense to look at this stuff.
Martin, the UK recently got a new prime minister. I don't know how long Rishi Sunak is going to last. Your thoughts on that, and your thoughts on the American midterms, which are steamrolling ahead. What do you think is going to happen? What's your take on the outcome here, and how is this going to further destabilize the global situation?
Well, as Matt and I think Joachim well know, and as you can already see, you asked me to give one word, I'll give 10,000. So I'll try and give quick answers to both, and we can follow on from them. I wish Rishi Sunak well, very well, and I don't mind him being a multi-millionaire in the international banking system, because at least he is competent within that system. But I think he's off to a very negative start, which of course Matt would say there's no surprise there. First, the ban on fracking, which is a crowd pleaser, because the British have been brainwashed to be anti-industrial environmentalists insanely, and they're even more vulnerable to this than anybody in Canada or the United States is. And look, you have 70 million people in Britain, real population, and they can only grow enough food even under the best So they need an advanced industrial growth economy. Those figures, by the way, come from the Oxford Project on Sustainable Development. They're not, I didn't make them up. I didn't have to. They're very easily confirmable. And so to retard industrial development and financial stability in Britain.
I think, Martin, your internet's frozen. Lose you? Martin, you there?
Yeah, it froze for a moment.
Joaquin, why don't we go to you, Joaquin, in the meantime? What's your take on Sunak and what's happening in the UK and the impending, less than 2 weeks away, U.S. midterms?
Yeah, well, Martin makes a very important point. It's good to see you, by the way, Martin, if you hear me. That is precisely an agenda, as he said, aimed at the further deindustrialization of the UK. It is part of trying to transform the UK into a military zone of the A5 system, or the City of London system that uses the U.S. military. So this kind of imperial system is not new, but I think that, as we see now on the ground in the conflict in Ukraine, or former Ukraine, they have a lot of limitations to what they're able to project in terms of power, right? So, but absolutely, this is connected to the Great Reset, deindustrialization. But there's a strategic significance in the UK because in many scenarios wherein there's a military conflict between the UK and continental Europe, which is another very strong possibility in the very near future, based upon any number of ways of looking at outcomes. Okay. In that scenario, the
Okay,
UK
guys, I'm back. I'm doing it on a different line on my phone this time, so hopefully this should work better. Heaven knows why. Hold up, Marty. Knocked out all our connectivity in the house. My wife and daughter are cursing in the background.
No worries. Joaquin was just finishing up. Then we'll go right back to you, Martin. Go ahead, Joaquin.
That's fine.
Fantastic. I'm glad to have you back. Anyhow, in that case, the UK would be very quickly absorbed or occupied or leveled by any kind of European or Eurasian power in that event. So if there's going to be any reindustrialization among A5 countries, it would probably be in the United States, just even based upon that trajectory. I mean, there's even good trajectories that include reindustrialization in the United States, but that would be a bad outcome involving maybe reindustrialization of the United States as well.
I agree.
Oh, now you're on mute, V.
You know what, Martin, during the time that you were cut off, I was actually following up on your point about the deindustrialization of the UK, actually. So that's actually where we was the policies of deindustrialization.
Oh, no, exactly right. And of course, we are back here again with a combination of issues. We have green romanticism, which is never based on either history, the economics of genuine rising living standards, which have occurred since the Industrial Revolution, or the basic issues of physics, chemistry, biology, and most of all, on energy within both closed and open systems that is necessary to sustain larger complex populations. And when you go into these issues, if you deindustrialize, as we all know, and I think have all taught and maintained in our different platforms and audiences, then you are condemning hundreds, if not billions, of human beings to hardship and death. So these are real, genuine moral issues in the most fundamental humanistic way.
Yeah.
Very well said. Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the most important lesson, especially for the younger generation, I would say, like under 50 at this point, who have been through a lot of very intense propaganda to hypnotize, to cast certain deep spells that go beyond even the logical domain and into the subconscious, which is where a lot of the deeper causality of our judgments and values reside. And I know myself, when I was younger, I would look at occasionally when I would happen to see a factory, not that we have that many factories still in Montreal. They're mostly hollowed out, former factories that have been gentrified and turned into condos. But when occasionally I would see a factory that would have a little smokestack, I remember feeling like a guttural sense of disgust in my teens and my 20s. Why was that? Did I think about the industrial processes that go on behind my my consumption of cornflakes? No, not at all. I didn't. I really had a very naive, as most younger people do, and even older people, frankly, idea of what causes my food to show up in my grocery store. It was a bit of a mystical magic. You go to the store and you get your food. You go to Walmart, you get whatever you need, and so there was a complete. I was educated to be ignorant of the causal underlying dynamics of what transforms raw materials into useful goods, what moves the raw materials, how do you extract it, how do you use it into something a bit more refined, how do you then move it and turn a raw material like timber into furniture through machinery, machine tools, machines that make machines that then can move it into another location where it can be purchased. All of these should be like elementary lessons of life for kids, even in elementary school, to get them to appreciate the interconnected web of creativity and of life, right, that sustains life. And instead, we're just given propaganda-based, laced, pseudoscientific brainwashing sessions week after week after week. With I remember my little cousins were being shown Al Gore's crap fake science video that he got an Academy Award for in 2002 or something in their school, teaching you that you're a virus, that every time we have industrial progress, it's just us killing nature. There's no, and so you look at the smokestack and you're like, yeah, that is us burning the earth. We are destroying everything when we allow industrial activity. And so, you get these idiot kids today who, again, I don't want to say, I shouldn't say idiot, because it's not like they could have known anything more based upon the types of school teachers that they have, who are actually radicalizing them into young, like, wannabe Gretas or little eco-terrorists who are, they think it's a great thing to splatter paint on Van Gogh's. Not that I'm a big Van Gogh fan, but still, I mean, the idea of spray, we've all seen the videos of them throwing paint on these things, then super gluing their hands to the museum walls. Yeah, the just oil. What's it called? Just Stop Oil or something? Just Stop Oil. That's who it is. And nobody asks where the funding is extremely opaque. And that is the reason why we should really look and consider that who the heck these people are. It's not a coincidence who these, them, Extinction Rebellion and all that. Go ahead, Matthew. No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about how the name of fascism is going to come about as an anti-fascist banner.
Yes, exactly.
And I mean, you got there's literally the name of Antifa, right? These anti-fascists who are running around in like black masks and beating up people for having divergent opinions from them and actually killing dozens in riots just a couple of years ago. Yeah. And these are the anti-fascists of today. I'm sorry, we have to reevaluate what our definitions are at this point.
Is Martin's other camera?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
We can see you. Your camera's working.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's because I'm cheating, which is the best way to get on in the world in general. I'm using my phone rather than my online system, which shorted off before.
Not a problem. If you want, does your phone have a speakerphone feature, Martin?
Yes, it does. Hang on.
Yeah, activate that. There you go. Now you don't have to. Now you can hear us without putting the camera inside of your ear.
Yes, no, I can hear you fine. Yeah, you guys are fine too, as long as you can hear me.
We can see that. You can hear us fine.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I fully agree with everything you've all just said. And, I wish I didn't, because I find on these issues again and again, and I'm sure you all do too, one makes new and admirable friends, which at my age is not a small thing. But that's the good side. The bad side is what we all agree 100% on is so depressing. And I wish we could disagree with each other more forcibly, because then there would be more hope in the world, at least some of us could see. But we all see the same light at the end of the tunnel, and the light is the express train running towards the whole human race, unfortunately.
Very well said. Joaquin, we're seeing moves in the United States. We've had, what was the last count right now, Steve? 28 food processing plants that have mysteriously caught on fire, right?
Yes, there we are. Go on.
We have issues with rails becoming a problem. We have about 20 some odd days left of diesel fuel left. And so, Joaquin, I'd like to know if you've been tracking that, because I know on your Telegram, Joaquin, you've been posting a lot of this information. What is your opinion? Are we facing some sort of asymmetric warfare against the population? And what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, very good question. With the war against food supply, what we should expect moving forward is a continued rise in the price of food, such to the extent that there will be larger amounts of people that will go further into debt and ultimately, let's say, lose their homes, etc., as the price of food rises. This is going to create a lot of social disturbance, but these social disturbances can also be weaponized. So the United States has a very large, permanent unemployed army, a large army of the unemployed that always has a depression, that always works against the rise of wages, always has a depressing effect on wages. And altogether, of course, there's multiple ways that the U.S. oligarchs can wing that. I think the project is overall pretty frail, while nevertheless, there's certainly no doubt, at this time, that there is a war on food supply. But I think that people who can see it coming, okay, and mind you, okay, there are people with millions, even tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars, okay, that can look at the present problems in food creation, supply lines, right, and can invest now in localized food supply solutions, and will be able to it will be able to make stabilize a new type of very high food price. Okay, but it's not going to be able to bring food prices down. Okay, so this is going to result in a further, like I said, debt crisis, but it's also, there's going to be a fertile soil for uprisings. But this public can be weaponized in a, as we talked about, anti-fascist direction, which in the QEP Long dictionary means fascist direction. And so it's a very interesting, sort of furthering of these same insurgency, these fake AstroTurf social movement, co-opting the grievances which the same people behind the social movement, like the contrived version of it, are the same people behind the collapse. So they're actually trying to create a sort of a problem that wherein the solution is their actual agenda. And I think the fact that this has gone on unchecked in the United States means that there are a dangerous lack of national or sovereign forces that for too long have had control over the national security apparatus. So that's my general take on it. But I think that people are able now to invest in these in new alternatives and localized methods, and to prepare, and also to be preparing. We're talking about collectives, and you can also start to avoid some of the issues where what you want to do is be in a fight for the right to have farms within county lines. But that's a fight that can be had at the county level or the state level. So again, all politics is local. Food supply will also be local.
Absolutely. Matthew, what is your opinion on the matter? Why is it seeming like the Western elites are breaking us, Matthew?
Well, I mean, I think that there's certain insecurities that the Western elites, so-called, I hate calling them that, but we're gonna find a new word. Sociopathic.
Let's call them the opso elites because they're obsolete.
Yeah. Yeah, the obsoletes. That's funny. That's
the Western obsolete.
That's the word. You got the word. That's good.
There you go.
All right. There's certain insecurities they're unwilling to deal with, and among the top of those is the fact that the entire edifice upon which they justify their existence is premised around a certain set of definitions or ideas of what they believe human beings must be in order for their system to so-called work, not that it's ever really worked, and for them to justify their existence as the Ubermenschen, the more than humans that have the golden souls because of their genetic stock and the idea content that they've subscribed to. They thus have a greater access to the real dark truth underpinning all of reality that gives them the sole authorization to, control the levers of supply, demand, production, consumption, what types of babies with what types of genetic attributes are born, and which types are not permitted in the new age of so-called unnatural selection. As we hear from people like Yuval Harari and these other neo-Darwinian, transhumanist freaks, they really do believe that they have this godlike authority. And so again, it's all premised on a certain set of ideas of what human beings as these Hobbesian creatures are that can only, if you give us freedom, all we can do is, selfishly just look out for number one, fight with our neighbors on a macro level. That means, if you let nation states make their own decisions, they can only fight with their neighbors over diminishing resources of whatever, they want to fight over. If you have different cultural groups, Muslim and Sikh and Hindu and Jew and Christian, all like sort of allowed to just be, they will only go to war in clashes of civilizations. That's all they can do. And thus, you need a Leviathan, some sort of a Kantian, uber transnational transhuman system that maintains order. And again, the problem is it's a very Pygmalion effect when you look into, because the oligarchy might say, but of course we're right. Look at all of the situations where we have given people freedom. Look at globalization. That was like freedom for everybody. And look at the disaster we created. Look, of course we can't allow freedom. Of course we need some form of new, great reset system where people don't own things anymore and somehow they'll eat bugs and be happy. But what people are not often given is the fact that the same people making those arguments, looking at the case studies of all the disasters of human history and crusades and other things, that those same forces were the ones who were lighting the fires, sparking the wars, creating the assassinations, promoting debauched forms of artwork and things that would inflame the passions and aesthetic sensibilities of human beings to fall more out of whack with their higher divine character. So it's like you've got this artificial, again, Pygmalion effect, right? They've created a disastrous situation and said it is not the arsonists who are to blame for the fires in the village. It's the fire itself which is to blame. And so if we all just ban fire, we'll be okay. We won't have the problem of fires anymore. You know, they won't hurt people, and we'll be somehow in this sublime bliss of harmony with nature. And that, you know, means industrial activity, food production, other things. But again, that is not human nature. Human nature has demonstrated something very much different from what the oligarchy would have us believe are. And I think, again, it creates a certain insecurity, the fact that human beings, and I think we see that increasingly, especially in Eurasia, statecraft that actually doesn't want to sacrifice their people. They want to create abundance. They want to overcome limits to growth, which are always pressing on our potential all the time. There's always limits based on the fact that we won't know everything or have, you know, technology to solve all problems all at once. That takes time. But so we actually have a big chunk of the world's leadership right now that are committed to not going for this mass kill. And the oligarchy is, again, just very insecure. And they're doubling down on everything they possibly can to try to create scarcity.
Awesome. Gentlemen, quick question for you all. In your opinion, what is the end game in regards to NATO, the West, with Ukraine? What level are they going to be willing to push this to? We'll start with V, and then we'll go around the horn.
Oh. You know, when you look at Ukraine, right, you're looking at and I've said this so many times, you're looking at a very well-funded military, right? You're talking about, I mean, the type of men, material, logistics supports. We know that it is America that is providing the telemetry. It is America that is providing the targeting. It is America that is providing the weaponry. And with all of that, okay, if Ukraine were to go to war against, let's just say, Germany, they'd win against the Germans. If they went to war against the Poles, they'd win against Poland. They're getting massacred in Russia. The Mothers of the Soldiers Association, which is the organization that is tracking a lot of the soldiers' deaths, because these are mothers who cannot get a hold of their sons anymore. And some of the data that they've garnered from the front lines, they're putting up the death toll of 389,000 plus. Okay, it's a big, big problem. The problem also is, I believe, and I said this before, the Western camps are divided into two rows. There's a sliver who have some sort of brain cells, but the brain cells that they do possess is so criminal in nature that they understand that they're not going to win, but they're going to milk the situation for what it's worth, because after all, we're fighting the Russians to the last Ukrainian. It has nothing to do with us. We're separated by two oceans. We're safe. That is one criminal element of it. What can we profit? What can we profit from the deals from Raytheon? Raytheon just supplied them a new surface-to-air missile system based on the AIM-120 AMRAAM, right? And they want to place more of those in there. And these are, you know, second-rate weapon systems to be at best. And they're not only are giving or being involved in the profiteering of these weapons contracts, but also the stock trades that go in conjunction with those defense contractors. So they're making money both ways, okay? But when you get to the think tank aspect of it, this is where you have a criminal element, but not really a criminal element, but an idiotic element. An absolute lunatic, ridiculous idiots who are consumed on their own hubris, who live within their own echo chambers. And in these morons who believe that they can literally win a war, these are the morons who say, hey, you know what, nuclear war ain't so bad. These are the ones who say, hey, a nuclear fallout could be good for climate change. And those idiots are the other aspect of it. And they believe in this anti-humanist dystopia that they espouse, right? So the end game is this. The end game is the criminal investor class is going to make out like a bandit. But the lunatic think tank class is going to go down in flames, and the Western criminals are not going to win at all. Martin, go ahead.
I agree.
Matthew.
Good,
Martin, you want to add anything to that?
Yes, well, first of all, I fully agree with V's analysis. And again, I wish I did not because it is so depressing and apparently simplistic. But of course, he's right on target. And the one thing I'll add is that there is a secular religious fanaticism driving all of these people. And that is what Leo Tolstoy, the great novelist, called the theology of the green stick. Tolstoy said there was a Russian folk tale that somewhere in the great forests of Russia there is a magical green stick, and if you find it, you can put all of Pandora's troubles back in the box, and the human race will be happy forever, and sin will be abolished. Just a simple little green stick. And these people believe that unlimited democracy, their way, with them in charge. Of course, it's not democracy at all, because only they decide what the policies will be and what the outcome of all these free and fair elections will be. But democracy, their way, according to them, will bring instant happiness for the human race. And like the communists and the Nazis and the Crusaders and so many others before them, they believe that since they alone have the secret to human happiness, they are justified in doing anything to bring the rest of us who survive to it. Doesn't matter how many people suffer, doesn't matter how many people you kill. So if you ask them, do you want to destroy the human race in thermonuclear war? Oh no, of course not. But perhaps limited nuclear war is an acceptable price to pay. And of course, that's where they go, one step after another. They are the Gadarene swine jumping off the edge of the cliff.
Agreed, 100%. And everybody on this panel, we all know there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war or limited use of nuclear weapons. There's nothing limited about it. Matthew,
exactly.
Well, I looked here at Joaquin's.
Sorry, Joaquin, go ahead.
There was a question. Was there a question?
What are your thoughts on the what are your thoughts on the West endgame with Ukraine, Joaquin?
Oh yeah. So the real course of action that the United States right now thinks that it can pursue is to create a Polish army and to go in with much more NATO equipment with a Polish army, and maybe attack either Belarus or to send that force into Kherson or Zaporizhia, so maybe into the more eastern and southern parts of Ukraine. So all of those are potential crisis, and we have this whole dirty bomb scenario that the Russians have alleged that the Ukrainians are actually planning. So they have not accused the United States. They have not accused NATO. That's a very important distinction. I don't know what you guys make of that, but in my opinion, it indicates that so long as Russia mirrors the same game that the collective West is playing, that Ukraine is not occupied, that it is a sovereign state, then they'll continue to negotiate any potential outcome, negotiated solution or a version of a nuclear crisis, or to blame them for all these things, right? They blame them, the Russians blamed Ukraine for the murder of Daria Dugin. They blame the Ukrainians for the blowing up of the Crimea Bridge. They blame the Ukrainians for the attacks on the Zaporizhia power plant. They blame the Ukrainians for all of these things, which they know on an operational level are being done by bad players out of the Pentagon. So you see what I'm saying. So we have a problem. We have kind of a problem here. So, but Russia knows this, but at the same time, since they have such a tremendous advantage, if the collective West wants to pretend that they can't negotiate on behalf of Ukraine, then they will continue to, grow, acquire more territory in Ukraine. Now it looks like there will be a push. Well, it could be any number of directions, but it definitely looks like Nikolaev is in their sights now.
Mm-hmm. Matthew, go for it. Your thoughts.
I mean, I'm very I'm obviously concerned, as I think everybody is, about the Russians who have raised, rightfully so, the alarm of a false flag. It's something that I think a lot of people have been looking at, and we already sort of know that the role that these 40 million poor souls in Ukraine have been assigned to play is sort of as a human suicide bomb, and so many of them, unfortunately, have embraced that task. Due to various forms of propaganda, conditioning, what have you. I mean, there's things I don't fully understand how you can wire so many people to blindly jump to their suicide like lemmings. But I mean, the thing with the oligarchy is that they have certain assets that they use, either individuals or whole people. And when those assets sometimes fail to succeed at one type of task, and I think that, there was supposed to be, by this time in the game, a very different outcome. And I think the Russian economy was expected to be much more crippled and subdued by this point through the sanctions, other forms of economic warfare by certain geopolitical planners of the West who were overseeing the Ukraine operation. Russia has turned out to be a very different creature than what they realized, and has found new alliances, new supply, new consumers from India, even Saudi Arabia, China, big time, many other nations to fill in for the lost output that they're not selling to Europe anymore. The ruble is doing very well compared to the collapse of the Western currencies, and I think, just like we've seen with people like Berezovsky or, idiot Skripal and his poor daughter, at certain times when their roles fail to manifest the way they were expected to originally, as Berezovsky had a certain role to play in the 1990s and beyond, when that couldn't work, sometimes they're more useful dead than alive. And I think, again, that can apply to a whole people too, such that, how many people have been led to believe that Putin called out the hit on Berezovsky or Skripal, and it was all the big bad Putinites and neo KGBists who just wanted to just kill their enemies. The reality and all of the evidence has pointed to this is that these were inside job MI6 hits that had nothing to do with like Russia didn't care if these people were alive or dead. It's not, they were irrelevant. So yeah, I think the danger of a dirty bomb, as the Russian representatives, various high level representatives have all made the point, is a very serious concern. We saw what the Western obsoletes were willing to do to their own people in 9/11. We saw what they were willing to do with the anthrax attacks. Again, just inside jobs that had nothing to do with the official narrative, but all to justify certain political effects, both externally outside of the United States as well as internally, in terms of shock therapy for the people in creating situations of increased surveillance, domestic terror, protocols, other things that we're currently seeing. And I mean, we had not that long ago, I think it was Sullivan, or was it Tony Blinken, I forget who, one of the two, had just said like last week that the January 6th event is far worse than anything we saw with September the 11th.
Correct. I think it was Sullivan.
It was Sullivan, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I mean, that's how these people are thinking. I think we're sort of overdue in some ways. I hate saying that, for another form of something a little bit more 9/11-y, maybe involving radioactive material. I don't know. But I mean, it seems like the oligarchy is desperate. And when you're dealing with a desperate, wounded animal, it could do a lot of crazy, desperate things that could hurt a lot of people, whether in Ukraine or in the West or both. It's danger.
Martin, what are some of the dangers that you're seeing over the horizon, especially as we're entering a new year and this year is being closed out?
Hold on a moment. There are so many. First of all, global economic meltdown is perfectly feasible. Further collapses in the supply chain. The most grievous threat we face without question is the Russians feeling provoked into a nuclear response or an attack against the West. We are dangerously close to Third World War over Ukraine. We can still pull back from it, but our own elites do not wish to.
No.
Shoot, is the internet locked up?
Damn. Okay, we got to figure that out.
Yep.
Joaquin, go for it.
Yeah, well, the threat of a nuclear war at this particular time is higher than it's been ever in my lifetime. I think that people should recognize that and understand exactly what that means, because without that recognition, we are in a spiral towards a never-ending conflict, which will definitely result in the end of life as we know it on the planet. There's no other way around it. There's just no other way around it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do we lose Martin?
Yeah.
Yeah, his internet crashed, but
Not too bad.
Look,
yeah,
look. I'll just say. Look, right now, the United States has refused to acknowledge, of course, this allegation that Russia has made about the dirty bomb, right?
Yeah.
But this dirty bomb could necessitate a response from some country in the region, not necessarily as a NATO action, but a NATO country. So after that, you might have Poland try to just, attack or declare war on Belarus or something like this, or do something to get another 50 or 80,000 Polish soldiers, maybe through these alternate means, but this is a crisis, you see, and it's not just blaming Russia and testing their response, if they're going to respond in a nuclear way to a nuclear provocation or what, you see, that's not. It's also how the collective West is going to then act like that's Russia's move, and then what's their move in response to that thing. So it's not a provocation. It's not a provocation, and it is a provocation in the sense that Russia in reality would have to respond, but how the collective West frames this is not a provocation. They frame it as an assault. So in other words, they do two actions, right? So if the first action is the dirty bomb, right, then what's the second action that they justify based upon the dirty bomb? You follow what I'm saying? And I'm greatly concerned about the sort of even conventional response, perhaps for the civilians of Warsaw and absolutely for civilians in Kiev, that might suffer consequences if they're not alerted by their leaders to leave in time, or they don't make provisions. This could create a humanitarian crisis because of all of the military targets, the actual legitimate military targets, where the U.S. command of a lot of these affairs, military affairs in Ukraine, is taking place out of the NATO base in Poland. So Poland and Belarus right now, it's the most. This is sort of beyond Cuban Missile Crisis level catastrophe, you see, because we have a very similar nuclear standoff, but it's confounded by the fact that one side of the standoff refuses to acknowledge that they're engaged in one, and that side that refuses to acknowledge that they're engaged in a nuclear standoff also has someone like Biden, who is Biden, and not someone like, say, Kennedy, you see. And so we're not navigating out of this crisis equipped with the caliber of leadership which had previously characterized that in the United States only several generations ago. This is significant of the absolute decline that we've been in. And this has really only precipitated the crisis, of course, but absolutely that's the case. Yes.
I got a question, Joaquin. With the current elections coming up right now in the United States. Do you see a potential shift somehow in the overarching foreign policy, at least on the war with Russia front, with that new dominance of Republicans in the Senate and the House?
It's a very, very difficult.
Too.
That's a very, very good question. After I want to just give a quick answer, and then I'm gonna jump off with you guys. So I want to thank you guys for inviting me on here in this hour. This hour has been fantastic, and appreciate the platform. VJ is always great to be on your show.
Absolutely.
Matt, I think that this crisis is now at a point where the United States, fortunately, by not acknowledging their involvement, can also not, engage in the plan, or they can tap on their Ukrainian, friends that Russia alleges are doing it and tell them to stand down. So if the event does not occur, then I would just take that as a de facto acknowledgement on the part of who leads NATO that they indeed got the message. So I would not look at the posturing. But going into the election, one of the big problems is that there's a tremendous sense of burnout, and among a lot of anti-war voters who happen to now be among adjacent to conservatives. They're not exactly conservatives, but they're voters that joined the Trump movement around MAGA. Yeah. And I think that, and they're very anti-war and very populist, very pro jobs, and very anti-China for that reason as well. So they don't have some abstract, sinophilia and love the Taiwanese as the true Chinese or something like that. They just don't like losing their jobs, man. Like anybody, right? I mean,
exactly.
That's the thing that can happen in life. Men have families to lead, and they kill themselves sometimes, even when they can't do that stuff. So, it's that, and that was not acknowledged by the Democrats. But I think that what they're really relying on is this machine that they've built, and the sort of Stacey Abramization of the political machinery, where they can, in the name of a truly just cause, by the way, which is voter disenfranchisement of African Americans, in particular in the Deep South, by manipulating that, they've been able to basically create a machine out of voters who are not part of a Democrat, let's say, funnel like Labor or the American Association of Retired People, or whatever the different big funnels of Democrat support, from voters who just receive mailers and be like, okay, what does my union say, or what does the AARP say, or what is my whatever you're involved in, the Rotarians, the veterans organization you're in, or whatever, right? People vote like this. So this crisis with the Stacey Abrams type machine, in which involves is going to involve, again, significant donations from people like Zuckerberg and others. We haven't seen any legislation or moves to think that it wouldn't happen, and we see more and more of loudmouth Abrams everywhere you can look on TV and the news right now. I mean, they're featuring her, which is a very big signal that they're planning to use her antics to commit basically collective vote fraud. And
it's already happening in Pennsylvania. It's already happening in Pennsylvania. Yeah,
absolutely right. It's happening in Pennsylvania, but it's ashamedly in the name of empowering disenfranchised African American voters. I got a frozen camera. I don't know if my audio's out.
No, your audio is coming in clear. I think you just deactivated your camera.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Yeah, all right. Anyhow, so but yeah, thanks for having me on. I'll just finish in this 30 seconds again, and just say that without those problems solved, and the demoralization of the voters, on top of their ability to just do what they want with the outcome, the fact that Team Biden, or the guy that speaks into Biden's earpiece, rather, to the extent that they're able to activate some kind of program of realistic response is highly questionable. But they may be planning on trying to simply ignore the majority vote, which is anti-war from both the left and the populist MAGA. The grassroots left is against war with Russia. The grassroots left is not, the sort of whatever the Hillary Clinton left or anything, or the Obama left, right? So it's a very big question, and I don't see good outcomes, because the Democrats also showed their own proclivity to steal primary outcomes from anti-war Democrats, leading to basically the defanging and shamefaced whatever antics from Bernie. I didn't do it, Sanders, and then, or you've got more interestingly, the Tulsi Gabbard case. But that's what I'm looking at right now. Again, guys, thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you, Joaquin. Again, folks, you can follow Joaquin on Telegram. We'll have his link posted so you can join his amazing room. Joaquin, thank you so much. Pleasure having you on. Matthew, I know you got to go very soon. We'll go to Matthew Ehret, then we'll close out with Martin Sieff. So, Matthew, go ahead.
Is Marty there?
Yeah, Marty's here.
Hope so.
Oh,
Can you hear me, guys?
Marty. Yes.
Good, excellent.
Go ahead. First Matthew, and then Martin. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, no, I would just say, we are in crunch time here, and everything Joaquin just said is very, very important. I am heartened by the fact that there are so many people who are like normal citizens, not establishment hacks, who are looking to take some serious positions of power across the United States. Obviously, there's always the issue of a lack of top-down appreciation for the historic forces or geopolitical global forces as they are actually being arranged, that are causing your problem. So a lot of people, from the better Republicans who are actually, I think, able to put the brakes on, or at least resist this nuclear annihilation policy, they do tend to think that China is their big supervillain enemy number one of the world, and they don't see the more subtle, real, actual forces that are shaping their intelligence agencies. That has a lot to do with the same operation that killed Kennedy, that killed Kennedy's brother, Martin Luther King, and that took over increasing controls over so much of our way of life, both cultural policy, security, economic, everything. Nothing was untouched by that coup. And it was a coup that took over in the 1960s. I hope that Trump can wisen up on some key points that he's been weak on. Obviously, when it comes to the warning around nuclear war, he's been one of the only voices that I've seen who has really come out clearly saying that we need to do something about this. So hopefully that he could provide some good guidance to those who look up to him on that point. But we'll see. I really think that people need to take a lot of responsibility at this point in crisis, though, and really do some serious mind work, and then follow suit with some actual actions, whether you're in Canada, Europe, Ireland, the USA. Like, citizens have some higher responsibilities that they didn't realize that they had.
Very well said. Martin, it's all yours. Take us home.
You're on
you're on mute, Marty. Marty, you're on mute.
Hang on.
Yes.
There you go. You're good.
You're good.
Good. We all see the same monster. We all see the same elephant. I think it comes down to basically every individual putting whatever individual pressure and protests they can, peacefully and legitimately, but overwhelmingly and repeatedly, and never giving up on every politician. Every time any politician emerges in public, they should be questioned relentlessly on these key issues. They should be embarrassed again and again. These people are super sensitive, and they are cowards. And if you press them enough peacefully, they will respond. But what one doesn't do so unconstitutionally or violently, that plays into the hands of the forces of evil. But that's the road I suggest is not an easy one. There's no guarantee of success, but it's the least worst one we've got.
Yeah, and I would just say on that point too, everyone has seen the effects of just that. It's now a completely super viral intervention made by I think it was a Institute supporter on a AOC.
Oh,
which
yeah.
was just a breath of fresh air, and he just sort of said the thing everybody had deep inside their gut, but were afraid to say out loud. It's kind of like the child in that story by, I guess it's Hans Christian Andersen. I'm not too sure. The Emperor Has No Clothes. Is that Hans Christian Andersen, Marty?
Yes, I believe it is. Absolutely, Matt.
Right, and that kid was able to, just by putting that into words, with the fact that the emperor had paid money for a non-existent outfit, that broke the spell, and it was liberating, and everybody was able to laugh legitimately at the truth of the absurdity of it all. And I think that, again, we see this taken off. There's dozens of videos I've seen of excellent interventions on Democratic Party nominal peacemakers, but who are supporting the war machine, and they've been called out as bullshit artists by their former support base. And this is what has to just, it's very peaceful. It's just saying the truth, and it's holding your representatives accountable, which is your right and duty, even as a citizen. And all of us as citizens, if we're going to be considered not subjects of an oligarchy, but actual citizens, that comes with responsibility to, again, hold the feet to the fire of those who are nominally wishing to represent you in a time of crisis. So yeah, we got to all do that and run for office if possible, and really just, again, work at the mind. This question of like getting knowledge of the topography that you're operating within. It's an invisible but real topography that you can only see with the mind's eye, which is full of, it's a mind field. It's literally a mind field of false narratives, myths, other things to deflect you. And you have to navigate through that towards the truth. And as you do
exactly,
that, you tap into something that will give you a better insight onto how to do battle. Where are the weak spots? Where are the Achilles heels within this, very intimidating looking, but actually very weak oligarchical machinery, which has been holding on like a parasite onto humanity for thousands of years. And it's about time we burn it off. But again, in a peaceful way. Don't get me wrong.
If I may add, in full agreement with my good friend Matt, guys, a definitive quote from my favorite documentary television series of the last 30 years. Documentary, I said, not fiction. The X-Files. The truth is out there.
Very well said, Martin. Very well said.
Perfect.
Gentlemen, I want to thank all of you guys for being on with us at Rogue. Martin, I want to have you back on as a solo show. Let me know when you're available again. I'd love to link up with you. We have a lot of exciting other future programs coming up. Matthew, again, it's a pleasure. Folks, Martin, where can people find you? And I think
I'll fill that in. Martin has a wonderful book, and his website is, I'll just share with you his website. Sure. Maybe put in the description box of this video. But you know what? Actually, it's escaped me. I was just thinking about it, and I've forgotten what the name of his website is. Damn it! I'm going to send it to you by email, and you guys.
Okay, yeah, we can add it later.
He's got like 8 books that he's published. They're all excellent.
Excellent. Very well said. Folks, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, thank you so much for listening in. RogueNews.com, the original geopolitical, geostrategic, geoeconomic news show on YouTube. And with that being said, El Cuco, a.k.a. Latinx, take it away. Oh, wait, Martin's back. Don't take it away yet. I don't know if you killed the stream yet, Siege.
It's still up.
It's still up?
Yeah.
Martin, you want to add? Is Martin out?
It was a pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you, Martin. God bless you guys. Cheers.